Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Partout. Joining me today is
Steve Bax.
Indeed. Today we're reviewing or closing out Steve's month of cinema with a review of what film, Steve?
Today we are talking about the 1960 historical epic Spartacus, directed by Stanley Kubrick, who has disowned it. Written by Dalton Trumbo, which is a very big deal for the time, and starring Kirk Douglas, Laurence Olivier / Anthony Hopkins, depending on what scene you're watching, Gene Simmons, and a who's who of a bunch of other people from all over the movie scene of the 60s.
Wait. Laurence Olivier / Anthony Hopkins? What?
Okay, all right. So I guess we'll deep dive right into this. The original cut of the movie got released in theaters and was about 5 minutes short of what you can buy now. Then upon subsequent releases, about half an hour of the movie got cut. And then in 91, they did a restoration, which put back all the about the half an hour that was originally cut, plus stuff that didn't make it into the original screening. But in between these releases, the original audio for the movie got lost. And so they had to bring back a lot of the actors to re-record and redub lines. And they couldn't do Laurence Olivier because I forget what the story is. He might have even been fucking dead by this point. But his wife suggested you get Anthony Hopkins to dub over his voice. So in certain scenes in the movie, it's not Laurence Olivier talking, it's Anthony Hopkins.
And who is he playing? What character is this?
This is... I'm trying to find his name real quick. This is Crassus, the general dude. But yeah, so if you go to like that weird bathtub scene where he's giving that dude the rub down and he's talking about like, is it moral to eat snails or whatever, that's all Anthony Hopkins.
Interesting. I did not pick up on that
It's
at
a
all.
really...
I did notice a couple times where it was like I noticed, okay, that part was ADR, but it wasn't like close-ups or anything like that. It was just kind of, oh yeah, that's those two characters are just off in the distance from the camera, but they're talking and we can hear them, so that's just ADR. Like I did not pick up on it as wow, that's weird. Okay.
Yeah, man, fucking old movies have the wildest history, and Anthony Hopkins does a very, very good impersonation of him. I feel like even I didn't realize it was him, and then I looked it up, and then I re-listened to the lines, and I still couldn't 100% tell, even though I knew.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So this is, I think, the very first time I've ever actually watched this film. I've seen a lot of clips before. There was a famous Pepsi commercial that used a clip from this movie that is still one of my favorite things of all time. Whose Pepsi is this? It says Spartacus on it. I am Spartacus. I am Spartacus. So, but yeah, no, this was an interesting watch. I am a Kubrick fan. I do like Kubrick films by and large. This is definitely one of his earlier films, and it's interesting to hear you mention that it's something he's disowned, because this definitely does not have the feel of a Kubrick film, except for some like very particular scenes that I don't think other directors would necessarily have gotten away with. But otherwise, this feels very just like, yeah, like classical Hollywood biblical epic kind of biblical and historical epic kind of movie, you know?
Yeah.
And apologies if you can hear the fucking tsunami of rain hitting outside my window.
I cannot. That is good to know. It adds atmosphere to our video about a biblical epic in case you're about to have a biblical flood.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's really interesting. The history of this movie is, I think, worth mentioning in relation to Kubrick in particular, but also in relation to the other movies we talked about, and we can maybe save that part for a little bit later as we get deeper in. But this is a really interesting movie because it's a who's who of auteurs who were all in this movie for very specific reasons as vehicles for themselves, that butted heads a lot. Everyone who involved in this movie hated being a part of it. Everything that Kubrick says that he got in, he said he had to fight for. And everything that you remember this movie for is stuff that Kubrick did not want to do one bit. But basically, this is one of Kubrick's earliest movies. He's done some bigger things before this. He did Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas before this, and he stands by that movie. So it's not like he felt like he matured over time. He legitimately just didn't like the experience of this movie. So this is clearly like a Kubrick star vehicle in that way. It's a big budget blockbuster epic. 10 times the budget of anything he's ever worked on before. At the same time, the movie gets fast-tracked and put into production, and Kubrick's the second person hired to direct, not even the first choice, because Kirk Douglas wanted to play Ben-Hur, and the director of Ben-Hur says, no, we'll look somewhere else. So Kirk Douglas is like, well, you know what? Fuck you. I'm going to make my own biblical epic. And so he did. And both movies came out the exact same year. And kind of split the box office in that way, which is interesting. So it's a pretty heavy Kirk Douglas vehicle. His production company was behind it. He read the original book. He had drafts of the script commissioned. He listed as an executive.
Yeah, he's executive producer on it. He's credited. Yeah.
So he's all of that. At the same time as Kirk Douglas and Kubrick are going at it, this is also the first film credited to Dalton Trumbo after being blacklisted. It's a major deal that both Douglas and John F. Kennedy recognized a film for a person who went to prison for not naming names at the House Un-American Activities Committee. And it single-handedly revived Trumbo's career, and he was able to walk on a studio lot again. So it's a big deal for Trumbo. The cinematographer talks about how much he hated Kubrick and how much he doesn't think Kubrick understood lighting and how many fights they got into. But lo and behold, the cinematography won an Oscar. So there's just everyone in this movie is a big deal for their own reasons, and they're all kind of fighting each other. To the point where Kubrick hates the character of Spartacus. He didn't want the final scene of the crucifixion in the movie. In fact, he cut it from the original screening, and Kirk Douglas literally wanted to kill him over it. The I am Spartacus scene was not his idea, and he wanted to leave that cut on the floor too. Which is insane, because it's the most memorable thing about the whole fucking movie, is I am Spartacus.
I'm really, I kind of figured the I am Spartacus wasn't Kubrick. When you said Kubrick no longer stands by it, I'm like, yeah, the I am Spartacus scene, it's a great scene, but it just doesn't feel like a Kubrick kind of move. So I'm not surprised about that one. I am a bit surprised about the crucifixion, because that one felt the most fucking Stanley Kubrick put this in the movie.
No, man, yeah, Kubrick was entirely against it. Kubrick's whole thought process was, Spartacus should just be a dude, and the movie should actually be about the Romans. Which, funny enough, is kind of more what Ben-Hur ends up being about because of how fucking long and boring that movie is. But so a lot of the regality and inner politics of the Roman Empire, that's all really Kubrick's touch. And he didn't like Spartacus because he thought Spartacus was just too perfect. And so literally nailing him to a cross at the end, he felt like cemented that perfection a little bit too much. And there's a lot of Christian allegory here. The movie literally opens with a monologue about how Christianity would be the fall of the Roman Empire. And so he just felt like it was
Which is hilariously off-base, but whatever.
There's a lot of hilariously off-base things about the Roman Empire in this fucking movie. This is not a historically accurate take at all.
No, it is not. Which is funny because because the holy grail of the unproduced Kubrick film is Kubrick's Napoleon, right? Kubrick spent 10 years doing research on Napoleon Bonaparte, trying to learn everything he could about this dude because he was planning to make a movie about him, and then like the year that he was going to start filming, another Napoleon historical epic came out, and it absolutely bombed, and so he couldn't get any money to produce the actual film. So the fact that Kubrick, like, when he wanted to do a historical epic, went balls deep in it, and the fact that this is so off base of actual history at several points is nothing short of hysterical.
Well, and it's funny because history repeats itself there, because this movie was also fast-tracked because Yul Brynner was trying to make a movie out of the Spartacus book, the same book that Kirk Douglas read, and they made Trumbo write the whole script in 2 weeks to fast-track it into production so that the Yul Brynner movie wouldn't happen. So basically what happened to Yul Brynner is what happened to Kubrick later, and Kubrick wasn't even the first choice for this movie because they fired the guy after like the first week of shooting when they originally started filming this.
Mm-hmm. That's hilarious.
It's so fucking funny how history works out. But yeah, no. Just while we're all on the top, what did you think of Spartacus?
I mean, it's a pretty decent watch. It's long as fuck. It's a really fucking long movie. Like, it's funny, the version of it I watched kept, it's a fucking streaming service that I watched this on. It kept the overture and the intermission in the like runtime, and it didn't have like chapters or like a significant fast forward button. You could only skip ahead 10 seconds at a time unless you like scrolled and fucked around with the timeline kind of thing. And so that was just awful. Trying to do that on my phone was fucking bullshit. It's a really fucking long movie. But it's pretty good.
I mean, it's a historical epic, though. It's about the same runtime as Lawrence of Arabia. It's shorter than Gone with the Wind.
It is way shorter than Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia is bordering on 4 hours. This is, at least the version I watched, you skip through the intermission and the prologue with the overture, and you're closer to just at the 3-hour mark.
Yeah,
so it is way shorter than Lawrence of Arabia.
Ben-Hur, I think, is about as long as this movie, and then Gone with the Wind is almost 4 hours, I want to say. So in terms of like widely recognized, and I think Ten Commandments is a little bit longer than this movie also. So like in terms of like historical epics, it's probably on the average side, but that's still really fucking long.
Yeah, no, 3 hours is really too long for a fucking movie. I don't think movies need to be more than 2.5. And then you've really got to sell me on it. This was
fucking Casablanca did it all in less than 2.5 hours. If Casablanca can do it, then you can too.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Like, Steve and I just need to do a Geeky Gentleman on, like, why are movies paced to be too long? And my lights just flickered, so I might lose power here. We'll see how this goes. Kind of tempted to switch to my laptop, but it wouldn't really help me with internet, so here we are. But it's like, it was just... So it's a very long movie, is my main gripe with it. It's still pretty good. It's like, I enjoyed it. I liked the character dynamics. I think my favorite scene is probably going to be your favorite scene. Let's compare notes on this real quick. So there's the one slave who's, I sing songs, and then Spartacus is like, well, what else? No, but what do you do? And he just sees him as like kind of this useless guy until he hears him like sing a song and like recite a poem basically, and then he just like, well, something, anyone can fight, but we need you to teach us to sing. Was that your favorite scene?
It
too?
actually is. I really like that scene, and it's weird because that's literally like an hour and 20 minutes or so into the movie. So like, there's still over half the movie to go, and we already got high. Yeah,
no, it's such a good fucking moment. It's just like, like, I love the idea of how they characterize Spartacus as like this man who is above his station in life. Like, he is a great mind in every sense of the word. Like, this guy should have been a king probably, or something like that. But he ended up as a slave, and so he led the greatest slave revolt of all time. Is just inherently fascinating. And I don't know if that's even necessarily historically true, but I started like looking up a couple videos on the history of this because I was curious. Like, I'd heard about the Spartacus thing before, but I'd never really like deep dived into it. So I just watched like one or two little short documentaries on it, and they keep a decent amount of the details. It's not historically accurate, but it's not like, and then Spartacus talked to Zeus or anything like that. So they do a decent job of trying to, you know, I feel like this is the right level of artistic license for a film. It does it in a way that it doesn't feel shockingly inappropriate and just like blatantly wrong, like that fucking one Tom Cruise Nazi movie. I hate that one.
Valkyrie?
Yeah, fucking piece of shit. Literally glorified an actual Nazi. I hate it. But anyway, so like this one, you know, it does a pretty good job of hitting some pretty good highs, and it glosses over some stuff and romanticizes some things that it probably shouldn't have, and like creates a love story that didn't exist in the context of it. But you know, all reasonable enough for me. But it was just, I don't know, it was an interesting watch. I didn't love it. I don't think I'd ever, without tremendous occasion, feel the need to go back to it. It's, like I said, I like Kubrick by and large. This one definitely like feels the most Kubrick trying to do what the studio wants him to do, I guess. Or I guess from what you're saying, what other people in the production want him to do.
Well, it's also the studio. There are a lot of stories about how he wanted to run production, and he had to compromise with the studio. I think more than he's really ever done in his career. He talks about how, because of the scale of this movie and how big he needed it to be, he only wanted to have 2 camera setups a day, which, if you know anything about movies, is absolute insanity. 2 camera setups a day is nonsensical. That would make every movie take 4 times as long to make, because the usual amount of camera setups is like 8 to 10. And then the studio equally wanted him to be like, no, we need to fast track this movie. You want 32 a day, which is also insanity, because how the fuck are you going to hire enough directors for 32 cameras a day? And so they compromised on 8. So like, it's funny how much of this movie is like artistic choice runs up against bankrupt commercial choice and just meets somewhere in the happy middle every goddamn time.
Yeah. That was the thing that I think hit me the most about this movie. You know, like we're kind of spoiled in this post Lord of the Rings world where like Peter Jackson basically brute force, like Peter Jackson pulled a Lucas and he pushed the technology to make the movie that he wanted to make. And so like Peter Jackson's basically the one responsible for digital armies and big epic battles on film that have existed in the last like 20 years since the Lord of the Rings films came out. Obviously there's other stuff that predates it a little bit, but like he's the one that kind of polished it and perfected it to what's basically the minimum standard now. But like it's kind of weird to watch a movie like this after a Lord of the Rings world where every time there's a giant army on screen, yeah, that's all computer. You just know it in your head. You just know that it is. You know, there's probably like maybe 50 to 100 actors, but everything else, that's all computers. Whereas this has just got shots and shots and shots of just massive armies combing the countryside and people marching in caravans across the plains and mountains, and it's like, holy shit. And that last fucking moment before the big battle that gets, you know, it cuts at a really interesting point. That last moment is you just see the like Roman legion actually coming into different formations to throw off Spartacus's advance. Holy shit, the scale of this is just felt. It's a palpable scale that's just like weird to watch in a post Lord of the Rings world, you know?
So fun fact on the big battle scene. Do you want to guess how many extras are in that shot?
Oh, probably at least like 2,000.
8,000.
Yeah.
It is 8,000 people in that shot and something like 11,000 extras in the movie overall.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. It's a big fucking film. Like the scale of this is just incredible.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I would not put this as one of Kubrick's best movies by any stretch. And it's definitely not one I would go back to without a lot of convincing. But it is genuinely a really, really great movie. And I think of all of the big sort of historical epics I've seen, um, this is probably my second favorite. I like it way more than Ben-Hur. I like it more than Lawrence of Arabia. The only one that I think would maybe top it is Gone with the Wind, just because that's more of a love story. It's a little bit more straightforward and a little bit more intimate. But I genuinely really love this movie. It's so well made, and there's just so much. There's such an interesting through line with this movie and so much of culture going forward. Because I'm sure you can tell, right? Like if you put the four movies we talked about in sequence with each other, of Spartacus and Conan and the Northman and the Green Knight, you can see, right, how those other three movies would not exist without this one. How there's not even so many as just references, but like literal takes away and developings of the formula and visual cues that come from not only this movie but also Ben-Hur, which came out in the exact same year. Like this sort of feels like the linchpin in a lot of later movies that tried to be epics in their own right, even if they weren't epics of this kind of scale. Lord of the Rings is also a really good example because there are, to a similar degree, the kind of Herculean effort that Jackson had to go through to make those movies is similar to and required a lot of the foundation created back in the day making movies like this. I feel like it's a pretty straight line to see like just entire sequences of movies like Conan and be like, oh yeah, this is clearly just crib noting Spartacus. Braveheart is just Mel Gibson's Spartacus.
100%. Like it is really funny how Braveheart is just the like Bollywood version of Spartacus.
Yeah, no, it exactly is. Like you can see when you go back and watch this movie just how much modern movies would not exist without something like this.
Yeah, no, it definitely has a lot of like iconic moments and shots in it. I guess I was surprised more by the stuff that like doesn't get talked about or doesn't get like referenced at all. Because I thought the scene you mentioned that Anthony Hopkins apparently dubbed over with the snails and oysters was a really interesting dynamic. I honestly, Crassus's character and like his role, I get like, ooh, man, if that lightning didn't hit just like a second earlier after I said Crassus would have been kind of dope, but but like Crassus's like function as a character and the way in which he is presented as loving Rome. Actually, hold on, just quick pause here. Steve, would you mind opening up and running a backup recording real quick?
I don't have a program for that.
Oh, you don't?
I don't.
Oh, well, if you can't, you can't. I'm just like, man, I might lose power in the middle of this. We'll lose the whole fucking episode. Oh, well. This could be one of those famous episodes. Cinema Month will never die. Yeah. Cinema Month will never die. It'll always be just the legend of the Spartacus Street. But anyway, like Crassus's like function as a character and the way his like motivations are described as, I found him the most fascinating character. Like 100%, I agree with Kubrick's take of doing the Rome stuff would be way more interesting because it's like the best parts of the movie. With just the way Crassus like thinks of Rome as, in order to lead Rome, in order to rule Rome, you have to serve Rome, and by that he means like the Roman ideal of, or the Roman like sense of imperialist conquest, and everything's like a game of growing bigger and outplaying your opponents, and everything's just about reaching higher and higher and never settling. That was fascinating to me, and how that parallels with Spartacus, who basically at the end of the day, as portrayed in this, just wants like basic dignity and to be treated, well and live a humble life. And meanwhile, you got Crassus who wants the excess, and it's crazy that the truly this is one of those few movies where the villain just absolutely wins. Like, just unequivocally, the villain is the victor here, and it's a, like, you know, not historically, like, obviously the long-term narrative of Rome as a society falls because of exactly what Crassus is doing. Like, it gets to its reach exceeds its grasp, but it is just inherently fascinating to view that character and that, like, Crassus as the stand-in for the ideals of Rome.
Well, and seeing the fact that there's like actual factions in Rome, like you've got Crassus, who's got the dignity of the Roman Empire, he's got the contempt for the lower classes and the decadence of the city, but then he's got his own internal rival with someone who is much more populist, someone that wants to usurp command away from him. There's that great scene where like the dude retires and everyone shames him for retiring in this moment. And that by the end you get this like really tragic story of a slave who revolted, and in the end, regardless of the infighting within Rome, Spartacus still has to basically kill his best friend to spare him from being crucified, then gets crucified as his wife and son look on at his dying body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a fucking trip, man.
It's pretty fucking dark.
Yeah, for sure. This was something else.
And that's another thing about
and I think that's like the most Roman it could be, right?
Well, that's another thing about
just the fact that like young hot Caesar is there the whole time too.
Yeah, that was weird. That one kind of threw me. I didn't expect him to show up.
Well, it's interesting because Crassus is kind of this forgotten figure of history. Like, I'd recognize the name kind of like tangentially in the back of my head, and in doing a little bit of research for this, I realized, oh shit, no, like this is kind of the guy. This is the prologue of Caesar, because Crassus and Pompey are mentioned in this, and Caesar as well, of course. Like Julius Caesar gets to mention, and you're like, oh shit, it's shit Globo. Or Glub Shitto, whatever. It's Glub Shitto when Caesar shows up, but like 100%, the first triumvirate that like was the precursor to Caesar becoming the first emperor of Rome was Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar. So like you see the beginnings of that here, and it's really fascinating. The way it's played isn't like quite the power grab and stratagem that it's in reality that it's played up to be, but again, this is the kind of thing of where I'm like, yeah, artistic license, this is whatever. It's not lying to you blatantly. It's showing you a version of events.
Right? Like, it's just so interesting to watch him maneuver around. The actor does such a good job trying to, like, really sell that, no, this is the right way to live, that we are ordained in this way, and you get, like, this really strong convicted villain that feels like even if he's entirely wrong about, you know, slavery, he's so convinced of it, and he's fighting an opponent in Spartacus who is just so righteous and idealistic in the same ways for the better reason that they just have such a magnetic conflict with each other, even though they're not on screen very much together at all. Because I mean, again, the runtime of this movie is 3 fucking hours, so like there's only like a handful of moments where these guys are interacting whatsoever, but each time it's really interesting to see kind of the absolute contempt this man has for Spartacus and everything that he stands for. And like the ultimate defeat in that moment towards the end, where he offers these 6,000 slaves that have just lost their big rebellion, and he says, look, none of you will get crucified, none of you, if you just give up Spartacus. And all of them are just, I am Spartacus, without hesitation. Like that.
Oh, it's so good.
It hits so hard. There's not even like, there's kind of a beat where he recognizes that he has to do it, but in the same frame that he gets up to say who he is, everyone else is just shouting from the top of their lungs, I am Spartacus. It's so good.
Yeah, and the fact that it's like his friend's the first one to do it and everyone else joins in.
Like,
absolute banger moment.
You think going back to like these kinds of like iconic film moments, the ones that get quoted and joked about all the time, that they wouldn't hit as much, but this one 100% does. Like, I saw that and I legit got chills.
Yeah, no, it's so good. Like, it kind of kills me that it's been referenced and memed and it's so like iconic and because could you just imagine the feeling of if you got to experience that without knowing it's about to happen? You know, like that is just then it like I think it would legit move you to just instant tears to see that for the first time because it's just so that's what the discussion around spoilers is like there was a study released recently. It's like, well, actually, spoilers don't ruin the enjoyment of a film. Like, no, it's not that it ruins the enjoyment of a film. It's that you can only get that feeling of not knowing what's about to happen the one time. So why would you steal that from yourself, you know? And just that feeling, that waft over, like it would make moments like that so like as impactful as they already are. It would make that even more so.
And part of what's really great about it is that like it's not a moment that feels like it kind of exists in isolation from the rest of the package. Because, and I bring up Ben-Hur a lot just because it's another movie in this same category, came out the same year that I watched recently. But Ben-Hur is really famous for the chariot race at the end. And the whole movie is kind of meh. The chariot race is amazing. It's done really, really well. It's really exciting. And then the movie just keeps kind of dragging on and on and on until it's over. It's fulfilling in that moment, but there's not a lot of emotional impact there. You're kind of just waiting to get to the iconic bit, and then you move on. With Spartacus, so much of this movie is building to that moment thematically. There's so much discussion in the movie about, like, the fact that the way they speak about Spartacus, they're really careful to never, like, acknowledge the fact that he's a man. They say, like, the body that calls itself Spartacus. And so in that moment where every slave is there, not even recognized as a human being, but they still call themselves out as Spartacus, that the label Spartacus, the title Spartacus, it gives them their own sense of worth and humanity and the thing that's worth fighting for. And at the end, when she's looking up at that body on that crucified corpse, like the whole movie is really engaging with that moment of what does it mean for all of these people to say, crucifixion is better than the life we were given, and so we say I am Spartacus in that moment. Like it hits on so many levels, and it doesn't feel like a gimmicky, a quotable moment. It doesn't feel like a meme. It feels like legitimately the climax of the movie, even though there's still like another 45 minutes to go.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's such a good fucking moment. Like. Legit, you could have just ended the movie right there. 100%. You don't need like everything else after that is actually kind of a downer. like it's already kind of sad because you know they lost, you know they're all done for. But you could like just roll credits right there, and it would still like have that ending on a high note kind of. To be
fair though, the scene I think immediately after where he recognizes Spartacus in the crowd, and he's like, "Make sure you save him for last." I would want to keep that. That moment's really good.
It's pretty great. Like I love that there's that game between them where it's like he's not gonna say it, but I know it's him, but I can't be 100%. You know, like it's pretty good. I like that one a lot. No, it's all great. I'm just saying, like if you ended the movie there, it's still like a downer, but it's on a higher note.
Yeah, more triumphant.
Yeah, so it's just an interesting kind of point. But no, I do like all that. The crucifixion scene was really interesting to me because, yeah, like conceptually that was the thing that made crucifixion such like an awful death. Like we all get wrapped up in Jesus Christ and like his suffering on the cross and everything and like all the like embodiment of that and like you know that it's awful and that's why it's like got such power like biblically. But at the same time, just the like functionality as to why Rome used it is, well, you don't just go up there and like you're in horrible pain for a bit until you die. Crucifixion ultimately kills you by suffocation, and it puts you in this weird spot where you don't die until your body physically cannot keep you from dying anymore, because what it does is the gravity naturally, the gravity and muscle fatigue naturally makes you want to just slump and stuff, but once you slump like that you can't breathe, and so your body forces you in that fight or flight response that you have no control over, your body forces you to pull yourself up, to stand on the cross and breathe. And that's just such a slow and painful way to fucking die that there are cases where it takes literally days for people. So the fact that he's alive there at the end and his wife is just sitting there, just die now, it's okay. And he physically can't, but he's kind of like got the victory even in that absolute defeat that he's in. It's just a really fascinating scene, and I actually don't mind it so much as a like, oh, well, now it just compares him too much to like the biblical Christ. I'm like, yeah, maybe, but like if there were to be a saint of slaves, I think you could make a pretty good argument that it would be Spartacus. It really, you know, like there's a good point for that.
It really does. Like that moment where she's telling him to just die really does kind of pull at my heartstrings. Where like that's what they've been resorted to at this point, where this whole glorious revolution has ultimately failed. But she's being able to get away to safety with his kid, and she just wants this poor man out of his misery, and he just can't. He's going to be on that cross until he dies of natural causes. It's pretty fucked. I was surprised by how much this movie actually ends up getting away with for being something that came out in 1960. Though, to be honest with you, I don't know how much of that is stuff that was in the movie when it originally premiered versus what we're seeing in this restored version that's the full movie. Because the fact that he does just die on the cross at the end, that's pretty fucking hardcore for a 1960s movie. A lot of the sort of more like horny kind of scenes with her and him, like him sneaking up on her when she's bathing, or like the moments like we mentioned before of like the weird back rub with Crassus. These are certainly things that would not be typical or necessarily allowed in a 1960s movie regularly. And
I'd agree with the horny thing. I feel like the back rub and the homoeroticism it was so particularly because it's with the villains of the film. I think they're able to get away with it with that, like, well, it's showing that it's bad kind of thing. Sure. But like the homoeroticism in this is remarkably subtle. Like to us as a modern audience, we notice it right away, but like I feel like if you were to take like the, you know, conservative film buff or whatever and talk about how you know, Spartacus is like a very like homoerotic film at points, they'd be like, no, it's not gay at all. It's just men being men, like in a sauna, you know, it's not gay.
Dude, Antonius and Spartacus are fucking lovers. You cannot tell me otherwise. That moment at the end where he's like, you will always be my father, he really just means you have been my daddy. He goes down on Spartacus's sword in more ways than one.
Here we are again, you impaled on my sword. Spartacus, why you gotta be gross?
But no, sorry, I don't mean to derail your actual intellectual point about homoeroticism.
Well, no, just like I feel like the way that the homoeroticism in this, I funnily enough, I actually did not pick up on the Spartacus and Antonius thing until you said something, but like, I think that's to the point of it, though. Like with the Romans, it's done in such a way where it's subtle enough that you don't. If you're not like keyed into the kind of film language of communicating gay subtext, no, I think this is 100% just something that would pass by the censors in the way that it just goes over their head, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's
and that's something Kubrick's pretty famous for trying to get away with whenever he can.
And I think the lead sort of gets buried there, given that, like I mentioned earlier, Dalton Trumbo wrote this movie. It was the first movie to bear his name in like 13 years. It was being boycotted by the American Legion for being written by an alleged communist. And so people were more mad about that, and a lot of the contemporary discussion of the film is kind of mired in it as a metaphor for the war on communism, essentially. And so that kind of stuff was dominating.
Which feels really weak and tenuous to try to pull connections.
Which is, yeah, I mean, you can make a certain argument for the sort of two factions of the Roman legions and then Spartacus, and I think there's maybe a charitable read about about the failures of bureaucracy on one end and the dignity of people on the other. But it's so abstract and it's so universal. I really don't think you could anchor it in like a Cold War allegory at all. But that's the thing everyone thought it was. That everyone thought it's written by a communist. It's communist propaganda, and it's really not. It's just a story about how slavery is bad. Although now in the year of our Lord 2022, that might as well be communist propaganda.
Man, why do movies gotta be so political now?
But yeah, no, it was a really big fucking deal in 1960 when John F. Kennedy broke with the American Legion and said Spartacus is great and went to go see it. It was a really big deal that Kirk Douglas. So the actual history of it, because there were a few versions of the script floating around, and they were worried about who to credit because Trumbo had been writing scripts under a pseudonym for a really long time, and Kirk Douglas actually got really pissed at Kubrick for Kubrick being like, "Well, don't worry, I'll just say I wrote it," and they thought like he was too giddy and opportunistic about wanting that credit, so they just announced that Dalton Trumbo wrote the movie, and they're saying they say, according to this and according to Kirk Douglas's book I Am Spartacus, where he reflects on all this, that Douglas coming out and saying that Trumbo wrote the movie is what effectively ended any power the Blacklist had in Hollywood, because this was basically the biggest movie of 1960. And so getting that mass recognition and that mass studio money behind it basically ended any idea that you could not work in Hollywood if you were a communist or refused to testify against communists. So that was pretty massive in its own way.
That's dope. Yeah. Good on Kirk Douglas. I will say this: fucking absolutely worst person that could have played Spartacus in this. If I had to pick someone that looked more like an American and nothing like a Roman or Italian or like European of any kind in any era, I would pick Kirk Douglas.
Well, I guess that's like
this dude looks like in this fucking movie. This dude looks like a football coach with that fucking haircut the whole goddamn time.
I don't know. I guess just when I'm thinking about movies in this genre and this time period, I feel like he doesn't look any more out of place than fucking Charlton Heston as Ben-Hur.
I mean, fair enough. It's just this dude looks so like it's just he looks so American.
Did fucking Tony Curtis rub you the same way too as Antonius?
No, because they put like some orange makeup on him, so that one didn't bother me as much.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, like fucking Caesar, whoever they got to play him, he looked fucking great. Like I legit have a crush on him, and I'm gonna go make a fan cam real quick. But like,
so
you know, I will do a historical nitpick on Caesar if you'll allow it.
Oh, sure. But just real fun fact about the dude who plays Caesar: he is also the boyfriend in Psycho from the second half of the movie that no one watches.
Interesting. Okay. So here's my historical nitpick. In the scene where they're in the sauna and Caesar has his shirt off, I'm legitimately bothered by the fact that like he is very nearly like clean shaven on the chest, because Caesar is actually like a nickname that was given to the man that we know as Julius Caesar, because it basically translates to hairy, and it's theorized it was because he was really hairy dude, like hairy arms, hairy chest.
Also, I am just kind of wondering what kind of manscaping technology they had in the Roman Empire.
I mean, like wax, when you get right down to it, is not like very complicated technology.
I mean, I suppose so, but it just sort of seems like so much wasted effort in the year 200 something.
In all fairness, the Romans didn't like body hair. They thought it was like a sign of uncivilized barbarians to have like beards and body hair. So it's actually really fascinating because the Greeks loved.
Yeah, I was gonna say because all of the Greek gods are big hairy dudes.
Yeah, the Greeks loved beards and body hair, and the Romans didn't. And so like the Greeks made these fucking incredible feats of technology that have been lost to time. Bronze statues where they're solid as a rock bronze poured. They're like 8 foot tall, and it's theorized they were like connected like in pieces, but no seams can be found on them. So either the seams like sealed themselves over hundreds of years, or they just there was technology that existed to connect the seams so perfectly. But anyway, the Romans saw those and they thought, oh man, those are beautiful, those are great. But that's a lot of fucking bronze. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna steal this. We're gonna bring it to Rome. I'm gonna have someone grab a block of marble and copy it. They're gonna fucking melt that down. And in the process of copying it, they would make edits. And so if the statue had a beard or like a really hairy chest, the marble copy would remove it. And the character in the sculpture would then be clean shaven.
Hilarious.
Yeah, so the Romans like, oh, we must preserve art, but you know, like we could do better.
Christ, that's funny.
Yeah, so a lot of those don't survive, and it's only the marble copies that still exist, which is quite funny. There's a couple that have been found that are really cool, but by and large, now the Romans said, "Fuck it, we're gonna melt this down. This is gonna feed the war machine." But yeah, so as far as I don't know what kind of manscaping technology existed. Listen, if they were willing to go to those lengths for the art, what do you think they did to like their own bodies?
Fucking hot wax baths, I'm assuming.
Probably some shit. I mean, fucking. You know, like medical technology was let's put some leeches on it. So you know these are hardly a generation of people that scoffed at something because it was a little painful.
I mean, it's a wonder we got this far with the skin of our teeth, I assume. So question for you for something you brought up earlier. You said that there were moments that felt distinctly Kubrick and others that didn't, and you kind of figured the Spartacus scene wasn't something he would do. What were the moments you felt like were truly like Kubrick movie moments?
I mean, again, it's funny because apparently my sense abilities are a little off, and I can tell what wasn't Kubrick, but I'm apparently bad at telling what was, because the crucifixion scene, 100%, I was like, oh yeah, fucking Kubrick. Like, someone's alive on a cross, Kubrick would have done that shit. Because it's just so, like, not something you would usually like to show.
I think maybe part of it is, if it was Kubrick's intent, it would feel less, I guess... Like, it'd feel less like a martyr. It would feel more defeatist, I see.
I mean, it's pretty fucking defeatist, but whatever. He might not have liked it, but he definitely shot it like he would shoot it. Sure, yeah. let me throw that one at it. So, like, that scene stood out to me, but I guess I was wrong. The old couple burying the baby. That felt distinctly Kubrick, if you want to talk about defeatist. Was that the cut you watched? That one jumped out to me, because it's like, I mean, in like a strict sense, yes, it shows the hardships that these people are still dealing with, even though they have chosen, you know, even though they're free from their life of slavery, but they're still dealing with hardships with that choice. Like, it functionally, it helps, like, literally, it's not needed in the movie at all. Like, it's not even, like, main characters, it's, like, fucking, like, background extras and shit. So it just, like, it felt like a very Kubrick-esque choice. What are some other ones? The whole snails and oysters scene, I think, had to have been. Any scene where we get, like, how much of her boobs can I show in camera seems like a Kubrick move to me.
Basically everything with the Roman senators, I feel like, had to be Kubrick.
Oh yeah, and it's, like, really good stuff. The Senate felt, like, very small scale, which is funny in this movie. Of all things, the set for the Senate felt very small. It might have, like, this might just be, like, other movies and media making things like that feel more epic, because, like, you know, you watch, like, 300 or whatever, and that, like, feels epic when you're in the law scenes, the Spartan Senate or whatever it is scenes, whereas this just, like, feels so small by comparison to that, so it might be other things after the fact going harder on it.
I will say, there is something about... Because Kubrick movies tend to be big, bold, atmospheric mood pieces, but they're always very tight despite all that. So, like, you could say something like A Clockwork Orange is like a 2.5-hour movie where a lot of it is kind of just playing to the sensibilities. But the script for that movie and the directing and the editing is all very, very tight. And I think even for a historical epic, this is a kind of movie that I feel like has a solid idea of itself all the way through, to the point where I don't really feel like anything is particularly wasted. And I think that's a particularly Kubrick touch. I feel like he really took pains to make this not just a long movie that feels like a journey, but a long movie that feels like every segment of it is important to the scale of what you're seeing. Everything from Spartacus being thrown into a gladiator, his body being painted to show the marks of where you hit to either kill someone or to cripple them or to make them limp and bleed out, and that being something that gets repeated in the combat throughout to the very, very end when he's fighting Antonius, and the first thing that happens is he gets nicked on the side, knowing that this is a fight that they cannot drag out. I feel like all of that feels very Kubrick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that scene stood out to me. It's funny, like this is the scene with the gladiators and the black guy has the trident and the net, right? Like that's the dude. When that fucking fight started and they had their weapons, I was like, holy shit! Because like every other version of it you see, like that gets parodied or sent up or referenced, they always pick a longer sword than what he's got. Like like, because when you talk about weapons and like melee weapons in combat, the biggest thing that is often looked for, and you can kind of see this in the evolution of swords until they became irrelevant because of guns, is increasing distance from your attacker, from your opponent. And that gets to like the point where you get the rapier, which is just like, it's 5 foot fucking long. The whole point is to be able to attack without someone being able to get close to you without getting hit. So then you just like go all the way back to this, and he has the shortest fucking stabbing and slashing sword in the world. It is, to call it a sword is like it seems factually inaccurate. It is like a souped up dagger at best, right? And he's got this little tiny fucking shield. Meanwhile, old dude's got a fucking like 6 foot long trident, and he's just like going after him. I was like, holy fucking crap. The visceral reaction I had of like, he's fucked. As soon as I saw the difference in the ranged weapons was just fascinating to me. And I, like, it's funny because I'd never seen, for all that scene gets parodied, right, and referenced and stuff, I'd never actually seen it play out, and I was legitimately surprised by the ending of it. I expected Spartacus would be the one to stop the fight and, you know, like, say, no, I will not kill this man. And the fact that it's, like, shown as, no, this guy shows him mercy and then immediately loses his life fighting was just fascinating. And the fact that, like, in this era, 1960, this is pre-civil rights, man. In this era, you have a black actor, black character doing something noble and heroic that inspired the main character,
yeah, man.
and serves as like the like inciting incident of the movie. Holy shit.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that you would expect Spartacus to be the person to say, no, I won't kill this man, because you're right. And not that I dislike this other movie, but you really do, to bring it back to my other point from earlier, you really do see how a lot of modern movies, something like Gladiator, is kind of just Spartacus with less teeth, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't dislike Gladiator, I think it's fine, but like all of the safe, easy moves that this movie could have taken, it doesn't. It goes out of its way to be darker and more interesting and more compelling than that, and Gladiator takes all of the easy ways out.
Yeah, no, it's like, especially again, 1960 black character.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, he still dies, so it's not like a perfect thing of representation, but like this black character actually serves to motivate and move the plot forward in a really like significant way. He's kind of the emotional crux of the film. This is the inciting incident that inspires the hero to action, right? and like it's interesting the amount of historical details that Kubrick keeps in here, or that is kept in the movie, I guess, not just by Kubrick but just in general. Because like the riot that starts off the rebellion, the escape, happens in the kitchen, and that is, from all the historical accounts, that's where it started, is really interesting. So like that scene in the kitchen beforehand that kind of like leads into it when the guard is like walking through and he finds the cleaver. It's like, I told you not to do this. Like, that's interesting. That's like really cool foreshadowing. It's really interesting to see that survive. I'm a little like, I guess not disappointed, but I'm a little surprised that some avenues weren't followed for things that could have been done, because Crassus is interesting in this from the historical perspective, of like what the fact that like they could have made him even more of a bastard of a villain, and they didn't, with what the actual guy did. So I think the reason that they didn't do this in like the historical accuracy sense is to make Crassus seem like more competent of a villain, because in reality he didn't just fight Spartacus the one time. They had like a series of direct encounters across the battlefield, or not direct encounters through battle. They put their soldiers up against each other multiple times, and Spartacus won a couple, but Crassus was mostly on the winning side, and it was just like political pressure that kind of made him have to fumble around a little bit more than he wanted to. But like the first time Crassus goes out and loses against Spartacus, it's because his soldiers were like backing away and running from the fight and like surrendering too quickly and shit. And so Crassus, by historical account, Crassus did this thing where he lined up his entire army, and every 10th man he just pulled out of line and like threw to the ground, and then like gave fucking sticks and clubs and branches to the other soldiers in line, and just made them beat the guys he pulled out to death. And he killed like 4,000 soldiers doing this to make sure that his army was more afraid of him than they were of Spartacus's men. And it's like, holy shit, where's that fucking villain scene?
Honestly, yeah, I feel like that would have been right at home here.
Right? Like, the fact that just, again, it's always interesting to, like, look up historical things and then just, like, no, they actually kind of took some teeth away from this guy, the villain of the film. So it was quite kind of an interesting thing. I'm like, shit, I'm gonna take notes for that. That's, like, a fucking great scene for a villain to pull. Like, holy shit, that's terrifying.
As far as these kinds of movies go, I think we are kind of coming back full circle to making fucking everything 3 hours long, which I detest. But if we are going to, an intermission can't hurt. There's nothing wrong with an intermission. I feel like historical epic as a genre, these big sprawling 3-hour movies that take place over a long period of time, that are massive in scale, that were the blockbusters of those days, I don't think that's a dead art form. I think we've just kind of come to the point where we've trivialized that runtime, we've trivialized that budget and that scale, and now you really can't tell the difference between 10,000 people marching on a set and CGIing 9,500 and only having 500 on actual set. And that's a little disappointing to me, because I feel like you look at the human effort of the chariot scene in Ben-Hur, the big battle scene here, or even like the fucking Titanic sinking in Titanic, and you can see like the sheer amount of effort that went into making this, versus like the big final battle in Endgame, which just looks like fucking mud with characters that barely have any color to them and most of them being CGI'd in.
Well, it's interesting to bring up like the Marvel thing, right? Because the movie that comes to mind for me that's related to what you're talking about there is Shang-Chi.
Oh yeah.
Because Shang-Chi tried to do a live action army fight, like the final battle in Shang-Chi with like the soldiers versus the the Ten Rings and the like demon spawn things. Obviously, the demon spawn were always going to be CG, but like they live shot the entire battle with all the soldiers and all the extras, all the soldiers, all the stunt performers, and then in post, because the lighting wasn't right for what they wanted, it was actually decided that it would be easier to just remake the scene and use the live footage as like reference footage for the animators to just do it all in CG, because otherwise they'd have to change the lighting that they wanted for the scene.
Which is just fucking insane to me. Like it's so much effort to get these guys out and do this. It's such a feat of movie making, and it's so interesting to watch, even if it's not the most perfect shot in the world, that it instantly makes it more valid than like the muddy, bland Marvel fights that we see. And I feel like, because I'm not a fan of long movies, I'm not a fan of a movie that's going to be 3.5 fucking hours long. Even to this day, as much as I love The Batman, I still think it's way too fucking long. It's 45 minutes longer than it needs to be, in all honesty. But which is a lot. It's a lot of fucking wrong time. But I can be made to look past a really long runtime if I feel like I am watching something that's truly epic, that really feels like a big 700-page book or something, you know? And so much of the elongated runtimes we see now are just not justified runtimes for what we're seeing. The fact that every Marvel movie, regardless of whether or not it's an epic crossover or not, crosses the 2-hour 15 to 2-hour 30-minute mark seems completely preposterous. Like, it seems, it's so unreasonable to make just every movie this long. It's so unreasonable to make TV episodes that are an hour and 30 to 2 hours long. Fucking Stranger Things, the last episode of season 4 is 2.5 hours long. That's fucking insanity. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's the last episode of a season, and it's not even the last episode of the series. It's so fucking long. It makes no sense to me. But you look at this. You look at what Kubrick and Kirk Douglas and everyone else involved was able to do with 10,000 people and 3 hours and 15 minutes of runtime, and it still holds up and it still feels epic. And I wish we could go back to throwing insane amounts of money to these kinds of weird feats of engineering almost. I give James Cameron more slack on Avatar for this, because I feel like he is legitimately trying to build something that has never been built before with CGI in a way that old historical epics tried to. But I feel like when you see a movie that says it's 3 hours long, it needs to earn the fact that it's 3 hours long. And so rarely do I feel like that ever happens. Even Ben-Hur, which, again, same genre, same year, does not feel like it needs to be 3 hours long. It feels like it's 5 different movies that are 45 minutes each, all spliced together. This feels like a legit epic. I feel like this is one of the few epics that earns that title.
Yeah, like you said, the last 45 minutes we debated about, you could maybe cut it if you just wanted to go with a slightly more triumphant ending. It'd still be like sad, they would still have lost, but it still like would, they would have won in your soul kind of thing, as opposed to the utter like trouncing that Rome puts on them. That's the part that feels probably the most like Kubrick to keep going with how that ends. But the fact that like that's the only point at which it feels like the movie could legitimately end and it'd be like a still complete story.
Yeah, and I mean,
whereas this is just, there's so much going on.
Even then, right? Like there are so many scenes in that last 45-minute chunk that are just so good you don't want to cut them, even if they don't feel necessarily as tight as the rest of it. And so I'm completely fine to leave them, because I feel like you're getting something out of it. Something that's stuck out to me watching a lot of modern movies that kind of take advantage of this runtime stuff is you watch something like Saving Private Ryan, and they want the opening battle, the storming of Normandy, to feel like a slog, to feel grueling, to feel violent and dangerous. And it does in the first 5 minutes, and then in the first 10 minutes, and in the first 15 minutes, and then it's 25 fucking minutes and I don't care anymore, Like, even the epic grand battle in this movie of all 6,000 slaves against the Roman army is not 25 minutes long. It's a lot shorter than
it's like 5 minutes.
Like the fact,
like it almost feels like too short, and that's the thing that's fascinating, is like the second that like it seems like it's gonna be epic and awesome, and then Pompey shows up, and it's like immediate cut to being over, and like
Yeah, because it
right?
knows how to use the sort of climax of that moment. It knows how to use all of the anticipation and just take all the wind out of your sails, and to really make something that leaves you feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and all of the right emotions without manipulating that runtime in that way. Like it has that old Alfred Hitchcock rule of the cuts are more powerful than the scenes individually. And with a lot of movies that are this long, you don't see a lot of cutting. You don't see enough breaks between the scenes to make it work that way. It's the same problem I had with Wolf of Wall Street, which is at some point the fact that it's trying to be too much just becomes too much in itself.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. This is just an interesting watch. It's funny because like I've had this whole conversation. Like I'm just fucking done with like cinema because I just hate how pretentious a lot of it feels in this day and age. And this is, you know, like Kubrick is a fucking madman. The more I've found out about Kubrick as a human being, the more I'm like, maybe I shouldn't like his movies. But like at the same time, you know, he fucking like he has a good sensibility of what makes for an interesting film. He's a pretentious motherfucker too, and he could definitely slip into that. Eyes Wide Shut is a piece of garbage fucking movie. But like I don't know, I feel like Kubrick's got sensibilities as a filmmaker that a lot of other like cinemaphile kind of film favorites don't, and like he knows how to bury the pretense under just like, oh, I'm gonna show you some shit though, man.
Yeah.
Like that's the advantage he has, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you just want someone who knows that they're making a movie and know that the powers that they have at their disposal in making that movie, about how cameras work, about how editing works, about how to like really manipulate your emotions with the tools at your disposal. And Kubrick's a master of that, and he doesn't feel like he needs to just hang the camera on a long character giving a speech or something like Mike Flanagan would. Like it's interesting just how even this early in his career, because he's only like 30 by this point. Like it's interesting this early in his career how powerful of a voice he still has, even though this isn't a movie that he was proud of by the end of it. I really feel like he should. I feel like this is legitimately a very good movie, but it
is the one that feels the least like him,
sure. But could you imagine being 30 years old and making them? Like I feel like just the triumph of being able to do it should trump anything in terms of, is it a good representation of his body of work? Because it's so insane to think that this 30-year-old dude was commanding 10,000 people on a $12 million budget.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a fucking crazy ass movie, man.
I really like it. I think I like it more having talked to you about it.
Yeah, no, it's one of those ones where I do legit feel like you kind of grow to appreciate things about it the more you find out, and just again like the fact that apparently they showed restraint in what they could have pulled reference from is kind of hilarious. I don't know. One day I need to get your thaughts on Caligula. You weren't there for the review on Geeky Gentleman when we did that.
I mean, I'd be down to do that.
I need to talk to you about Caligula at some point. Because that's a fucking fascinating movie.
Yeah, I'd be down for
And
that.
Connor Nielsen joined us for that one. He's like, 10-minute orgy scene. It was so pointless and boring. And I'm like, no, it was the best part of the movie.
Yeah, no, I'd be down for that.
The fact that is a fascinating piece of film history. All right. Do we have anything else we really want to get into about this one?
I think I'm kind of tapped. I think it's very, very good.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, next time we'll get some other Geeky Gentlemen back, because even though I'm the one that bitched us about cinema, I sat through every episode of Cinema Month, so fucking suck on that.
And it really wasn't as bad as you all thought it was going to be, I feel like. I feel like I picked 4 very entertaining movies for very different reasons.
Oh, no, for sure. Like, I didn't think it was good. Like, I trust your taste in film most of the time, Steve, with the exception of, like, Joker.
Movie fucking rules and you know
it's
it.
just... No, I don't know it. I, in fact, am unaware of how anyone could think that movie rules, because it does indeed suck the big one. But beside that, I don't know. I generally trust your taste in films, even if I don't particularly care for them myself. But hey, here we are. Anyway, so yeah, but next time we'll be joined by some other geeky gentlemen, and we'll be reviewing that new Star Wars show, Kenobi. So look forward to that. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the guy who made us sit through Cinema Month. I'm so sorry.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
All right, your power.